Greetings. Welcome, everyone. The regular City Council meeting of San Juan Bautista is now in order. Please stand. Please pledge allegiance. John, can you lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If some of you are wondering why I salute, I'm a Vietnam era vet, and when the Vietnam vets came back, they were not very welcome home. So what we did a couple of years ago, we started saluting so that the people would know that we served, and we served proudly for our nation. So that's why you see me salute. Thank you. Roll call.
Mayor Flores.
Here.
Vice Mayor Edge. Here. Councilmember DeVries.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan. Here. A quorum is present.
Thank you. Public comment. Do you have any public comment?
Sandra Aracha.
Try to get through this in 3 minutes. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to address the City Council this evening. My name is Sandra Recci, and I come before you to address a very important issue that first concerns me as a grandmother and second as a resident of San Juan Bautista. I understand the City of San Juan Bautista contracts with Level 1 security to patrol our streets and to provide overall security for our city. Unfortunately, I do not believe that Level 1 has provided the high-quality service that my family deserves, given that our taxes go to pay for some of their services. I want to share with you an incident my family encountered with Level 1 on March 2nd at approximately 10 p.m. As we were driving back down Polk Street toward 3rd, we saw 2 patrol cars from Level 1 security with the car lights directed toward the parking lot where we live. We pulled in the driveway and saw 2 Level 1 security personnel with flashlights looking into our grandson's car. I do not know what they were looking for or why they were looking to the car. I only know they never provided us with a justified response or just as to why. As I asked if I could help them, they said no and started to walk away. My husband got out of the passenger side of our car and walked toward the security guards. They came back toward us. My husband asked them what they were doing there, and they stated that they had reports regarding stolen vehicles being disposed of in San Juan. We responded that the car belonged to our grandson, and I recognized one of the guards who knows my grandson, knows specifically that car he drives. My grandson's car is not stolen. The head security company asked if we knew of a young black man that lived here. We said yes. Then he asked us what his name was. We believed that this line of questioning was inappropriate, and we did not give him his name. In addition to this incident, we discovered that on numerous occasions, one of the Level 1 guards has used the company vehicle to harass the boys by flashing a spotlight on them for no specific reason. On March 4th, I went to City Hall to request a copy of the report from Level 1, and I was told they didn't have it. I called the company requesting a copy of the report from the night of March 2nd. They said it wasn't prepared yet. I would need to fill out a request for public documents form. I went to City Hall on March 5th, requested the public documents form. I received it and returned to City Hall on March 6th. On March 4th, I received a call from TJ. He's the owner of Level 1. I told him I was requesting a copy of the incident report of March 2nd. I specifically wanted to know what they had reported about the incident. He proceeded to tell me they thought they saw someone running into the parking lot, and that was the reason they were there. Interestingly, neither of the 2 guards we spoke with on March 2nd ever mentioned that they saw someone running in that area. We reviewed with a neighbor who also was present on March 2nd and was a witness to the conversation and said she never heard the guards mention of someone running into the parking lot. Given this incident on March 2nd and numerous times the Level 1 guards have flashed their spotlights on my grandson and his friend, I believe this following is in order. The incident on March 2nd should be reviewed by the City Council, and obvious that Level 1 has not been totally forthcoming with the facts where the guards are at my home due to the vehicles being disposed of in San Juan, as they stated, or was it because they just saw someone running? Facts reported on possible incidents law-breaking are key to violation. The City Council should be just as concerned as I am that the City receives the professionalism it pays for and that the reports issued by Level 1 are factual. When the owner of Level 1 asked whether I knew if a young black man lived where on March 2nd incident took place, it raised some red flags. Why would he ask about his race? Could it be that he was profiling? This presented serious and deep concerns with me and my husband. How does race come into play during day-to-day interactions with Level 1, both in and outside of San Juan? The City Council should be just as concerned as my family about these questions. I have consulted with the employees of law enforcement. He has informed me that Level 1 may have violated several guidelines that you have for your San Juan Bautista website. The City Council should review and take appropriate steps to address the possible violations. Thank you for your consideration of the suggestions I have made. I was told to go to the city manager with this complaint or bring it to City Council. I chose to bring it to City Council because I want my concerns to be on record. I am providing you with a copy of my presentation as I want to be part of the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
So do I give the copies to Laura?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you know, you're not allowed to comment on items that are not on the agenda, but I can assure the citizen that when the report comes in, we will make it available to her.
Any other comments?
Vanessa Gonzalez.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I work with the Office of Senator Ana Caballero, and I'll be working here in the San Juan Bautista area. I met the mayor and City Council Member Edge, so I just wanted to introduce myself to everyone else. If you could ever be of assistance, I'm going to provide my contact information via email to all of you. And also, we are currently in Salinas in our district office, and we'll be moving to a different location, so I'll also provide that information to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Darlene Boyd.
Good evening, City Council. I would like to do a little bit of house cleaning because I don't think that appropriate remediation has been done for 2 unnoticed and undisclosed City Council meetings. One was on December 18th. It was mentioned in the City Manager's report, whereby she said there was a team building thing. You guys talked about team building, but you never gave us an appropriate and full answer as to what you discussed at that meeting. We need to know as the public. Also on January 22nd, right after the City Council meeting, 3 of you, Ms. Edge, Mr. Flores, and Ms. Jordan, all walked into the City Manager's office along with Ms. Mall and never disclosed or noticed what was said then. You were in there for quite a while because several of us stood out here on the sidewalk and watched you walk in and stay in there. So as a citizen, I really need to know what was discussed in specifically, and it needs to be publicly noticed. Thank you.
Next.
Jackie Morris Lopez.
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor Flores, and City Manager, Mr. Tweez, and City Attorney, Ms. Mall. I am concerned about, sort of on the tagging on Ms. Boyd's comments, we do need to do some housekeeping. I know there's been several complaints by the public in regards to the placement of the 3 stop signs on McCullamy in front of the Village Garden Apartments. It was understood that those got put in place by the former city manager without any approval processes via the regular routine approval, meaning i.e. a current traffic study for calming the traffic there. The stop signs were there one morning or the next morning, and quite a few people in town are concerned about that. I think the process needs to be revisited. I recommend that the stop signs be removed and you proceed with traffic studies to determine what needs to be done there. And there are other streets in the city that maybe require some traffic studies as well, or taking a second look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are all the cards.
Anyone else have comment?
I would like to briefly respond to Ms. Boyd's comments. You're allowed to do that under the Brown Act. You can make a brief response. I believe on January 22nd that I had a meeting back in the city manager's office with Council Member Jordan. She had a concern about a potential conflict of interest, and we talked, and there was no other meeting of the majority of the council members at that time. So there was not a Brown Act violation at that time.
Okay. Any other public comments? All right, we'll move on to consent items. Item 3 on our agenda All matters listed under the consent agenda may be enacted by one motion authorizing actions indicated for those items so designated. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a member of the City Council or a staff member or a citizen.
I'd like to move to pull 4D, or 3D, excuse me.
I'm sorry, you want to pull?
3D.
3E?
D, dog, as in dog.
No, okay. All right, we'll remove D. So it'll be A, B, C, and E. It's approval affidavit of posting agenda. Approved minutes for February 19th, 2019 regular meeting. Approved minutes for February 25th, 2019 special meeting. And waive reading of ordinances and resolutions tonight's agenda beyond title. Chair, accept the motion to accept.
I'll make a motion to accept all matters listed under consent item B with the exception, or consent items be enacted with the exception of item D, and authorize the actions indicated for those items so designated.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Presentations?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a short staff report on item 3D that has been pulled from the agenda, and then you can have council discussion and action. This is here at my suggestion, brand new to the process, obviously, but it was clear that the council had made a number of appointments over a number of meetings, and there was no single place where all the appointments were listed, so I suggested to the staff that we prepare this comprehensive list and have the council confirm those appointments so it's all in one place.
Well, I was concerned about one particular part of the list, which was the Planning Commission. I think that there was 3 Brown Act violations on the December meeting, and therefore, it pains me to say this, but the appointments might not be legal, and decisions by the Planning Commission and HRB Board might not be legal until we rectify the Brown Act violations.
Well, the city attorney may have some views on that, but let me just suggest my observations. I have heard people suggest that there was a written ballot process for the selection of the Planning Commission, and that's not an unusual practice, and certainly lawful and occurs in other agencies when there are multiple candidates. It would have been appropriate to put the names of the council members on the ballots. They're not secret ballots. Written ballots are allowed, not secret ballots. The city clerk actually has a copy of the ballots, so those records have been maintained. And with this action we're recommending tonight, the confirmation of the appointments, I think it would rectify any problems.
So I do not know the facts of those alleged 3 Brown Act violations. This is the first time it's been brought up by a council member. And the avenue, if you believe there are Brown Act violations, you can go to the grand jury or you can go to the district attorney's office and report them. Without knowing any further facts about when or where these Brown Act violations were, I can't really comment on that further.
Well, they occurred right here. Right here.
So it wouldn't be a Brown Act violation if we're all here meeting on an agendized item.
The Brown Act says there shall be no secret ballots, either preliminary or final. That's right. That's language straight out of the Brown Act. Since the ballots were not signed in any way, there was no identifying mark, we don't know who voted for who, it became a secret ballot.
I do not believe there was an attempt to do a secret ballot that night, but then going back to the process, you will recall when you were on the council last term that we changed the process for electing planning commissioners, and we left the process up in the air rather than formulating rules so that the council can do them while they're sitting on the dais. And that is what occurred that night. There was a vote based on how the council felt they should vote. I don't think it was an attempt to keep the ballot secret. The city clerk announced the ballots after each vote and kept the ballots.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I would like to revisit that process again. I just think it should be, frankly, in closed session. Even though it was my recommendation, it was completely changed around, so it no longer became my recommendation. I was trying to rectify another problem, and the typical laws of unintended consequences, two more appear somewhere else. But, I think if we followed my initial recommendation, which was just to require each individual city council person to interview each applicant instead of just merely saying, okay, him. That was my recommendation, and I think that's the correct way. And I'll revisit that at a later date where we can agendize it and et cetera.
So where does it leave us with this item? 3D.
The staff recommendation is to adopt the resolution confirming the appointments.
Now, do you, yes, go ahead.
I have a question about that. So, Mr. City Manager, I'm confused because I heard you say two things. One, that the ballot process in and of itself is not problematic, but the fact that secret ballots are used or were used is a problem. So, two questions. Were these, since they're unsigned, secret ballots, quote unquote, as defined? And number two, if they were, what effect does that have on the process, in your opinion, or the city attorney's opinion?
Well, I think the city attorney's opinion is dispositive here, and she's indicated that they were not secret and that the votes were announced. I said it would have been a preferred practice for the ballots to have at the top a blank for each individual councilman to put their name so we'd know who. Now, they are distinctive marks. We could recreate them and say, well, some people put an X and some people filled in the bubble and some people put a check. Yeah.
Is this your X? When you say it'd be preferred, is it preferred or required legally?
That's a question for the city attorney.
I don't, where in the Brown Act is this found? Do you know? Because I'm not familiar with this provision. I mean, I can understand why, but it announced everything out.
Section 54953C1. No legislative body shall take action by secret ballot, whether preliminary
You're
or
out of
final.
order.
Number 2, the legislative body of a local agency shall publicly report any action taken and the vote or abstention on that action of each member present for the
Ms.
action.
Boyd, if you'd like to address the
Yes, I will gladly address.
Go up to the podium.
Thank you. It's right there. Section 54953C1. No legislative body shall take action by secret ballot, whether preliminary or final. Number 2, the legislative body of a local agency shall publicly report any action taken on the vote or abstention on that action of each member present for the action. How do you define each member present if you aren't announcing who voted which way? Now, this came up in the training that 4 of you went to with Sakai and at the county superintendent's office. And she came up and Mr. Freeman asked about this vote, and she said, no, it has to be identified.
So once again, this was a particular situation where it isn't the normal course of the city council when they're doing a vote to not report out what their votes are. This was a particular situation where we were trying to follow the city code and elect planning commissioners and cast ballots, and I don't think there was an intent to do it secretly because the votes were announced. So it's not the normal course of action for the city council to vote on a project and not say how they vote, and that's really the intention of this section. But if we're really getting down to the nuts and bolts and you're worried about it, I
really think there needs to be a revote, because right now there is a cloud hanging over this particular city council from the way that you behaved at the December 22nd meeting. And right now, as it stands, it can't be identified who voted which way. And according to other attorneys that are trained people in this, it needs to be identified. And you're going to be doing our citizens a favor and restoring trust in you as a voting body, as a legislative body. And that's very important in this town.
Thank you. Well, we still have this consent item, the resolution. How do we want to go on this?
Also, you forgot the HRB committee.
The what?
HRB committee.
It's the same, so it won't matter.
But we didn't forget it. The code establishes that the Planning Commission is the HRB board,
Understood.
not separate appointments.
So I guess my question remains, was the process, the specific ballots we used in that process, was that process defective as a matter of legal conclusion? And if so, is that defect fatal to the process such that these appointments are invalid? And that's a conundrum. The city manager mentioned something, well, this is a vote, almost reaffirming those, but to really redo the vote, wouldn't we have to have all the candidates? Because what do we have, like 10 of them here that night?
We would.
So how would you redo something like this?
So the interview process wasn't in question. What is in question now is the vote, which you'll recall you took 2 or 3 votes in order to get a quorum for each member. And there's 2 things you can do. You can either agendize this for the next meeting and identify your votes by putting your name on the ballots, if that is what the citizens feel is defective. Or you can revote, but you've got the same panel of people, so you will likely have the same vote. So I think if there's a problem, you should agendize it for the next meeting and either identify your votes or revote it.
Well, what if I could suggest a third alternative? So we've presented you with a resolution confirming all of these appointments, including the council members to various regional groups. You could vote on the Planning Commission separately, if you wish, if there's to be if a split vote is the question, and the members would be recorded on that with respect to that. So we would be asking you to confirm all of the appointments except for the Planning Commission, and then in the second recommendation, confirm the Planning Commission, and there may be a split vote on that.
Question, do we have to go back through the process?
No?
No, we can just look back at our ballots.
Well, only the council members know how they would vote on the question, should these 5 individuals be appointed to the Planning Commission, and we won't know that until the question is called.
So one of my goals isn't to mess up the Planning Commission. I'd be willing to vote on all 5 of them right now and just approve them. That's not the issue. The issue is I didn't like the process in which it occurred. And so my main goal is to get the process changed to a far better process. And I would like to agendize on a future meeting a change in the process for selection of planning commissioners in the HRB board.
So you're talking about the future?
Yeah.
Because they'll leave us with this thing here. How do we correct this? I mean, there was nothing intentionally done, let's put it that way. Okay? Maybe lack of knowledge on,
Yeah, I understand. I understand that. Well, I said what I wanted to come out of this is a change in the process. I've talked to 2 of the applicants, and they didn't like the process very much. They didn't like spilling their life story in front of everybody on CMAP and everything. Just wasn't very pleasant for them. It needs to be done in closed session, and I stated that at that meeting.
Specifically, cannot be done.
Okay.
So that was the problem. When you changed the rule last time, you didn't want a subcommittee, which is what's usually done in most cities. You didn't want a subcommittee interviewing people and coming back to the council with recommendations.
Well, I wanted a subcommittee, but
the council members wanted to interview those people at the meeting. So it was kind of a free-for-all because it's not the way that's done at most cities, and you didn't want to put rules in place as to how it would be done. So I agree with you. I think the process needs to be further defined.
Okay. And that's what I would really like to do. as far as I'm concerned, I could vote on all 5 of them tonight and say, yeah, approve them, and I'd be fine with that. I'm not objecting to the people. Don't get me wrong.
Well, if that's all, the chair will entertain a motion to approve resolution
Did you take
2019
full-on
concerning
public
appointments and
comment?
commissions. And the,
I'm sorry, was there full-on public comment? I know Ms. Boyd spoke, but I don't know if you opened it for the public or not.
not yet.
Okay.
No, I lost my train of thought here. Well, if you have public comments, go ahead. You got a comment?
I don't have a card, is that okay?
That's okay. The reason we take a card is so that we can identify who spoke.
Okay,
It's
all right.
not, I mean, you can speak without a card.
Okay.
You don't have to have a card.
All right,
Okay?
thank you. I just want to add my opinion, just my opinion to this, what Councilman Freeman was discussing and DeVries, is that I think that whether it was intended or not, in the eyes of the public, this process was very corrupted, okay? Whether it was intentional or not, it doesn't matter. I'm reading according to a website that talks about secret ballots violate the Brown Act. It's there in black and white, and I'll just take a minute to read it very briefly. The Brown Act expressly prohibits secret ballot voting in open meetings. Any item under consideration that is not subject to a specific closed meeting exception must be conducted in a fully open forum. Okay, so casting a vote for the advisory committee or planning commission members by secret ballot does appear to be in violation of the Brown Act. So it sounds to me like part of the process was okay, but then when you move to write your tallies on a piece of paper without identifying which council member voted for what candidate, that's where you stepped into the muddy waters of violating the Brown Act. And I do believe with Ms. Boyd, I don't know if there's anyone else behind me in the audience, that already from the very first initial council meeting with our newly elected council members, there's been a little bit of fogginess to the process and what's been going on. I want to move forward and get to a better place, and I think that we really need to address these things in retrospect. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
If there was a potential Brown Act violation, we all did it.
It wasn't just
There wasn't 3, there was 5, potentially.
That's right.
How do we go forward with that, if there was a Brown Act violation?
So under the Brown Act, you cure.
Right.
And that's what you'd be doing, as city manager suggests, by revoting tonight, or we could put it back on the agenda next time, and you can write your names next to your votes if that's something that you feel needs to be done.
That
I still...
seems like the cure.
Pardon me?
That seems like the cure.
Yeah. Which one?
If the problem is these ballots didn't have our names on them, let's put our names on them, and then
Exactly.
then the defect's removed.
Yeah.
Isn't that simple?
Yes.
Perfect.
Could we verbally do it right now?
Oh, but
No.
we went through 4 rounds of those things
Yeah.
with a whole bunch of people. I wouldn't even know how to begin.
So then we would have to wait till next meeting?
So if members aren't prepared to do what Mr. DeVries has suggested, how do we proceed? If you don't know how to begin, if you can't identify your own ballot, how are we going to move forward?
I had a problem with this ballot thing when it occurred, mainly because mathematically it didn't seem to make sense to me, because I forget how many candidates we started with, but wasn't it, does anybody remember? Was it
6.
I think there was 6.
I don't recall.
7, 6.
6 or 7, that whittled down to how many were appointed?
3.
3. So, and how many rounds of these secret ballots without names on them were there? 3 rounds of those things?
3.
So there should be minutes for each of those votes.
Right, so you'd have to get the minutes and then get the ballots that correspond to the first round. Everybody passes them out. Okay, yeah, I think that's me. Put my name on it.
Yeah.
Then go to round 2. Okay, then it's cured. I think that's it.
But as I stated, I am fine with voting all of them in tonight, in bank, verbally, or whatever, however you want to, as long as we get to revisit the process. So the process is screwed up, not the city council,
But John,
okay?
there's two issues right now. You're
Yeah.
talking about prospectively.
Yeah.
That's the way we should do it. And what I think others are concerned about is in retrospect, do we have a problem? And if we do, or maybe we do, maybe we don't, but why don't we remove all doubt by this hearing?
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's how we stay on the side of the angels in the community.
Okay.
Myself, that's just my opinion.
So, okay, where do we go from there? Suggestions?
Well, Councilmember DeVries has made a suggestion, apparently he's prepared to make a motion. If the council members are prepared to review those written, not secret ballots, then we can do it at a break tonight and conclude it tonight, or you could do it over the course of the next days, and we can put it on the next agenda.
Isn't there any harm in doing it next time? So we don't have to drag this out tonight? Do you need this done tonight?
No, we could do it next week, or we could do it next
I
week.
think you can do it the next meeting.
Yeah, we can do it
I don't know
the
if
next
Debbie
meeting.
has any
I
comment.
think it depends on whether the planning commission, whether you're, as they're slated, whether you will allow them to act or whether they need to act at the next meeting. Is there some public hearing that needs to happen?
Right.
And I think the second thing would go to the city clerk and what type of minutes they have now and whether they have to go back and listen to the tape and then try to piece together what happened from the tape or whether they kept minutes with the ballots from each vote.
Can we have our cake and eat it too and appoint these 5 and
Yes.
here at the next meeting?
Since we all know who we voted for, nobody is objecting to the vote to our committee, the Planning Commission and the HRB. So if we go ahead and give them the okay to continue on with the fine work that they're doing, and by next meeting, go through our ballots, through the minutes, and write our names on everything. I make a motion.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the resolution and agendize
D.
D for the process. For-
May I make a public comment, please?
Yes.
I was at that meeting, and I listened very. My name is Mariana Thomas, and I live on 45 Monterey Street. And I've been living in San Juan I lived here now for 14 years. I was at that meeting, and I listened to each one of the candidates that applied for the Planning Commission position, which I think is very important. And one of the candidates that applied for that position, who was the most qualified, most articulate, and had obviously done their homework, was not selected. It is not, Mr. Freeman, just procedure that's involved here. It's much more. Council members, in all respect to you, to the lawyer, to the city manager, when it's a question of voting that many members for a very important commission, you cannot tell me that I, as an intelligent citizen sitting there listening to people stating their qualifications, should go along with the voting, which I really think did not reflect the qualifications of the people you chose. So I think an issue here is much more than just procedure. And that's what needs to be addressed because the Planning Commission and the Historic Board are very important for the growth of this community and decisions that are made. Thank you.
We have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Second the motion? Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Approving 3D. And we'll agendize, or we'll do that tonight on the...
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I had the impression that council members would appreciate the opportunity to come in individually and look at the ballots and decide which was yours, and we'll agendize it at the next meeting to confirm those individual votes in the written, not secret ballots.
All right, thank you. All right, we move on to 4, presentations, information items, and reports. Number A, presentation by San Benito County Public Health Services, proposal for smoke-free outdoor dining in the city. So we need the lights out so you can see that.
Right.
Keep forgetting on this thing.
Okay, my name is Laura Colburn. I'm with San Benito County Public Health Services. And first of all, I want to thank all of you guys for giving us, me and my colleagues, an opportunity to talk about a very important issue today. So today is, we're talking about a proposal for smoke-free outdoor dining ordinance in San Juan Bautista. So what is secondhand smoke? Secondhand smoke is smoke that's coming from two different sources. It's coming from the end of a tobacco product, and this also includes vaping and cannabis as well, and then whatever the smoker is exhaling out of their mouth. Next, there is no free level of secondhand smoke exposure that is safe. Even brief exposure can be harmful. So what we know about secondhand smoke and the hazards, how we as policymakers and residents do something about this. So the way that we can solve this is by creating a formal ordinance to protect residents and visitors from secondhand smoke. All restaurants in San Juan Bautista have a voluntary smoke-free policy, and they're listed on there. A voluntary policy is not enough for creating an equal playing field for all businesses, and especially for future businesses as well. And it also lacks assurance of constant sustainability. Okay? It is not held to the same level of accountability as a formal ordinance. So a policy, an ordinance backed by our council would support our businesses in providing a healthy, smoke-free environment for all. Right now, there are 151 jurisdictions throughout California that have a similar smoke-free outdoor dining policy. And if we're talking about our neighboring counties, there are policies in Santa Cruz County, Capitola, Santa Cruz, the city of Santa Cruz, and also in Monterey. So in order to establish a formal ordinance for this, San Juan Bautista would be the first in our county. And so we're hoping that this ordinance will be first and the others would follow. And let's see, sorry. So we also have support from our local residents and also businesses. So when we ask them a random sample where we ask them if they support this type of ordinance, smoke-free outdoor ordinance, we have 96 people that said yes, and we have 4 people that said no. And just to address some of the questions that you guys had, the mayor, you mentioned that it was great that we surveyed the restaurants, but you wanted to see if we could get letters of support. So what I have here are letters of support from 5 restaurants, and then I also have also a letter of support from Breathe California, which works with people on policies like this, local residents, to make these policies happen. So, and another thing is, Mary Edge, you were asking if the policy includes bars or cigar lounges, and they're excluded because we're only talking about this ordinance to include places that serve food and have an outdoor dining area only. Mr. Freeman, you asked if the city of Hollister has this type of policy. The answer is no. If you guys were to adopt this, you would be the first ones in our county to actually have this type of policy. And Leslie, you asked if the restaurants support this issue, and yes, they do. So we do have those packets, and I can give you those to you guys. In conclusion, we would like you guys to please support a formal ordinance to prohibit smoking in outdoor areas in San Juan Bautista. And we're going to show a clip real quick. This is a 15-second ad that we did at the movies in San Juan Bautista. In Hollister, at the movie theater. Is it going? There it is. And we have, let me pass these out, and then Dr. Gale will be next to talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was not part of this week. Sorry.
Thank you, Laura.
I have a question. Do you have a sample ordinance?
Yes, that's also included on the last section. There's a sample, which is the last document with those letters.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and staff. My name is Dr. Gail Newell, and I'm your public health officer for San Benito County.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to be here. It's my first time at one of your city council meetings. I've been health officer for a little over 2 years now, and I want to offer my services in any way that I can support you in your important work. So if you need consultation in the future or any kind of advice or input, expert opinion, I'm here to help at the county's expense. So I think you are probably all convinced, I hope, that there's overwhelming scientific evidence that secondhand tobacco smoke causes serious illness, especially from lung cancer and heart disease in non-smokers. There is no question that there's also strong evidence that secondhand tobacco smoke in non-smokers causes death. And it's estimated that 2.5 million Americans have died since it was first recognized that tobacco smoke caused cancer in 1954. So 2.5 million Americans since that time from secondhand smoke, non-smokers otherwise. And there's no question that smoke-free laws of any kind, including outdoor dining, as you are considering, helps protect restaurant patrons, and perhaps more importantly, restaurant employees who have direct and constant exposure to the harms of secondhand smoke when smoking is allowed in outdoor dining areas. I know that the only reason that you might vote against this kind of policy is economic, because I know you're concerned about the businesses in your city. But there's overwhelming evidence also from the National Cancer Institute with the World Health Organization, and I'm going to read you from their document of December 2016, that the evidence clearly demonstrates that smoke-free policies do not cause adverse economic outcomes for businesses, including restaurants and bars. In fact, smoke-free policies often have a positive economic impact on businesses. And I could go on and on with examples of communities like yours who have adopted this kind of policy with positive economic results. I could also go on and on with all kinds of medical and scientific evidence supporting this kind of ban, and with 15 seconds remaining, I'd like to know if you have specific questions I know that there's more information about brain development now in infants and children and adolescents in response to exposure to nicotine and other smoked substances. Is there any way that I can be of advice on this issue?
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Now, a question to our attorney over here. Our process in passing an ordinance, there's a whole process to that, right? I mean, it has to be before.
Right, so you'd want to put it on the agenda for a formal ordinance next week, and next month, it'll take 2 readings. So 30 days apart at regular meetings to pass an ordinance.
Okay, so can we take any action at this time?
You can direct me to prepare an ordinance.
Okay, that's fine. All right, well, we'll have an agendized consent, on the consent agenda next time, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
I think there's more public comment.
You have more public comment on this? Yes.
Yes.
Your name, please?
Good evening, City Council members.
You have to give us your name and
Yes,
address.
yes. My name is Erica, and I'm a resident here in San Juan Bautista. I'm also a mom to a 17-month-old baby boy.
Oh, yay.
And when we catch a beautiful day to go out to local restaurants and want to catch some rays with my son, we can't because there is secondhand smoke. And people around that are smoking don't think that they could affect the people around them. It's dangerous, and especially for my son, since he's still developing. And as I stand here tonight with San Benito County as a mom, as an educator and support this smoke-free outdoor dining. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Marcus.
My name is Marcus Edwards. I'm the general manager at Jardines de San Juan, which is an extremely large outdoor dining restaurant here in San Juan Bautista. Anyways, Jardines de San Juan's been there for a little over 40 years, and being in the service industry, a customer service-oriented business, we obviously make money in making sure people are comfortable in our restaurant. More recently, people are starting to champion a more healthy lifestyle. People are starting to be more aware of, things that are in the air around their small children, babies, pregnant, stuff like that. And we as a restaurant do our best to accommodate them. With our restaurant having so much outdoor space, there is a lot of potential for people to smoke around the corner or anything like that, and for the smoke to go right over the wall into, people sitting and dining. So myself, my other managers, as well as lots of our staff members have, gone outside to ask people to go across the street to have their cigarette or something like that. And I would say about 90% of the people are, absolutely, they'll go across the street. But we do still have an occasional person who's like, well, I don't see a sign anywhere, so I'm going to stand right here and smoke a cigarette. At that point, that's their right. We can't really say anything more after that unless we want to get into some kind of awkward argument with somebody. So it would be nice to have some signage around town, especially places like Doña Esther's, JJ's, and Jardines de San Juan that have a lot of outdoor dining. So you can just say, sign's right there. Just go across the street. We don't believe this would have any adverse effect on the traffic in town in our restaurant. Again, championing what the doctor was saying, we actually think this might benefit us as with our weddings and stuff like that in the back. We do have a lot of people, celebrating and everything like that, stepping outside to fire up cigarettes and everything like that. It'd be nice to alleviate the awkward requests to people who are not feeling so cooperative, to have something to fall back on, and it would be really very much appreciated by the outdoor dining business Jardines in town if City Council would back us up on it. That's it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Marcus.
I have a couple questions.
There are a couple of questions, Marcus.
First of all, why did you not go into radio?
Clear channel. Yeah. iPods. Yeah.
Just, I wanted ask you a more generalized question, but specifically you brought up weddings. Where would a wedding guest go to smoke on that if they're on their back patio?
Right across the street.
Where that field, where the Chinese restaurant used to be? So they have to go across the street and stand way over there? But there's no dining going on in the back patio.
On the contrary, there is. Because when we had weddings back there, normally we're feeding everybody.
Oh, I see.
So we have a buffet going, lots of people eating. After 8 o'clock, nobody's eating. But normally at that time, the number of people smoking right next to the door at the restaurant outnumber the security guards, so they don't even try and fight that battle. They're just,
They
okay,
couldn't
whatever.
go right out the wooden gate on that sidewalk and smoke. They'd have to go across the street. Is there a proximity rule that would go into an ordinance? No smoking?
20 feet, I think, is about
20 feet from the door.
the standard on that. In the city and in Monterey, in San Francisco, Monterey, Santa Cruz, 20 feet away from the door of a dining facility is normally required. Unless it's from any indoor facility, which I think San Francisco is at that point now. Santa Cruz might be. Monterey is probably well on its way.
So the more generalized question is this. I came here thinking that I'm kind of a small government person instead of a big government person. Let the individual businesses decide for themselves. And when I was told all the businesses have made that decision themselves to prohibit smoking, then I said, okay, well, then what's the issue? But when I read your letter in particular, I never thought about it from that perspective, which is that an ordinance like this would actually help you. You wouldn't perceive it as government telling you what to do. You consider it an assist.
Absolutely.
It would relieve the burden of you telling people.
It would. It would kind of give us, somebody on a corner say, hey, this is something everybody in town has decided that we want, and it would be really awesome if you would cooperate.
Well, thank you for that perspective, Mark.
Thank
you. Any other comments? Well, I guess we direct staff to draft a ordinance. We have a sample for our next meeting. It'll be agendized.
We should have comment from the council.
Comment from the council.
Well, I just wanted to thank all the people from the county health department of San Benito County. Sometimes our little city council and our small staff struggle with issues and items, and you brought a complete package with sample ordinances and stuff like that, and I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work and with that.
Thank you.
And I don't think you're going to get anybody that says, okay. I think we're all,
Changed my mind.
Nicely done, Marcus. Laura, thank you for being prepared when you came to see us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we move on.
John, did you get one?
I
was just asking John.
It's okay.
Pardon?
It's okay.
Thank you. All right. 4B, monthly financial statements.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, these are the routinely presented to you monthly statements prepared by our city accountant. There are some footnotes that you might want to take a look on page 23 of your packet that indicate variances, but we are on track.
I have a couple of questions, if I might. Sewer operations, a bulk of that is sludge removal. That's page 1 of revenues, budget versus actuals, 7-month period ending July 31st, 2019.
Yeah. That's the question, yes.
Yes. Yes, thank you for that. That's what I wanted to know.
In fact, on the warrant list, you'll see a very large expenditure, over $400,000, and that was to the contractor who was doing the sludge removal.
Okay.
To follow up, does that finish? Are we finished with them, or of paying them, and have they invoiced us for everything and all that?
Yes, Laura, who does our books, is nodding her head, yes. There is still some remaining sludge which is settling.
Right.
So it's not 100% removed, but we can now have significantly increased the capacity of the...
No, I was just asking about if they finished their billing cycle.
Yes, they have. Here.
Yeah, the removal of the sludge is going to give us an opportunity to do cyclic maintenance instead of, this whole thing, let it go for 30 years or whatever. So we're in a good spot.
Footnote E, a large part of the restroom and road fund budget is slated for projects that will occur sporadically during the year. Verudi Park is included in that? I didn't see anything on the large spreadsheet.
Frankly, Councilmember, I can't answer that question for you tonight. It's one of the questions I have as I start digging through the budget.
Okay.
You know that under the city code, a portion of the transit occupancy tax is deposited into the restroom and roads fund, I believe it's called. It can be used for either capital or operations. Years ago, I had suggested that we use some of that money to pay the cleanup costs and maintenance costs at the restrooms, but it is also available for capital projects such as the Verudi Park restrooms. I don't think this is enough to complete that project, so there must be other funding sources, and I don't know them yet.
Okay, thank you.
Rotary.
Rotary has just been trying to get through this project for a very long time.
We initiated the project, Rotary did, and we're still trying to stay on top of it.
Oh, so maybe you're a funding source. Great.
Maybe. Maybe, you never know. But let's explore that.
So, and I have a question. ATEC Systems, what is that?
That's a company called A-Tech. I was going to mention it in my city manager report. They are the company that manufactures the iron and manganese treatment plant that we have purchased and that is now being installed over the next 30 days at the Well 6 site on Old San Juan Hollister Road.
Any other questions?
I have one question relating to the larger spreadsheets. Is that all going to be addressed in your report? Because Mary asked about, Assistant City Manager Edge asked about the ATEC system, and I know I also had a question on it, and I was just wondering if that was all part of your report.
I apologize if I'm fumbling, because I am fumbling here. Could you explain which large spreadsheet you want me to
It's
refer
the one
to?
that...
This one.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so that's the planning and building status report?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, I can wait.
building planning projects. You're going to touch that?
Well, it's on the agenda. We're prepared to answer your questions then or now.
I am done with monthly financial statements then.
All right, well, there's the city manager's report.
Okay. So, for the members of the community and the council, I wanted to advise you that we are, over the next 30 days, installing the iron manganese treatment plant at Well 6. That will provide for clear water. A couple of months ago, the city manager was able to have released the the limitation on the nitrate water that we had in our wells. We've now cleaned that up. The next step is to get the clearer water. We need the iron and manganese treatment plant. If you went out there today, you would see the pad for the plant has been poured. It's waiting to be cured. There will be a chlorine building, so we're going to chlorinate at the well site. And all of this should be installed in the next couple of weeks. But it'll probably take 30 days from now to get it all approved by the state. Okay. And one other city manager report item, I want to just remind you and the community of the budget calendar. So on May 21st, we'll be presenting the recommended budget for the following fiscal year, and we'll be recommending that you hold a public hearing and adopt the budget on June the 18th. So there'll be approximately a month of public review of the proposed budget.
Okay. That it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, building and planning report. That's it.
Now, if I can answer your questions, I'd be happy to, but Mr. Todd Kennedy is here as well if you have more detail.
Did you have
I have lots of questions.
Well, bring them up.
Number 1, Casa Rosa. When are repairs going to begin? Do we know? Do we have an idea? We deemed it a nuisance.
So if I may take a moment to bring the council up to date, there's been considerable activity and study on my part to get up to speed. So as you know, the building was approved by the Planning Commission some years ago for renovation, but a building permit had not been applied for. And when it was discovered that the building did not have a building permit, we proposed a series of administrative citations, which we will now follow up on. In addition to that, the council, you recall, at your last meeting, held a public hearing and adopted a resolution declaring the building a public safety hazard and a nuisance, and directed the city manager to abate it. The city manager made contact with a local contractor and asked that contractor to evaluate the project and give some suggestions on how it might actually be done, the so-called constructability. At the last Historic Resources Board meeting, that contractor presented to the Historic Resources Board his views on what needed to be accomplished. And we were asking the board as a staff, the council directed the staff to bring it into compliance, but we were asking the HRB for their views on a couple of options, one of which would have been to retain the balcony porch, another would be to remove it and store it. The HRB essentially concluded that we needed to do that which was safe. I promised the HRB board and citizens who had inquired of me and later at the meeting that I would review the entire record and come to a conclusion as to how to proceed. We now have 2 separate reports from structural engineers. I need to reconcile those with the chief building official. We need to have plans drawn, building permits issued, and a contractor located, so we're probably a couple weeks away from beginning the work.
But the scope of the work hasn't been agreed upon, has it?
That's one of the issues that I need to resolve with the different opinions. It's not clear to me whether 2 structural engineers saw the same thing and came to different conclusions, or whether they saw different things. So
if they came to very different conclusions. Yes.
But once you have a consensus on scope, then is that scope then further reviewed by Planning Commission, HRB, or Council? It
would not be by the Planning Commission or the HRB, and under the order that you've given to the city manager would not, unless you want it to come back to you. You've directed the city manager to abate the nuisance.
Right, but I think that, I don't care who does it, but I think the community is interested in what the scope of that abatement is going to be, specifically locking off the porch or not, and putting it into storage, someone suggested. And I know the Historical Society is really concerned about the porch lasting in storage and being ruined and so forth. So I think we as a community want to understand a little bit what this agreed upon scope is before it's how to go do it.
Yeah, because then it'll be too late.
So 2 suggestions then, having fulfilled your direction for the city manager to define the scope and get the work done, I could report it to the community so everybody knew what that was, or we could bring it back to the council at the next meeting.
What's your desire, folks?
My feeling is, this is one vote, one voice, that yes, the city manager determine a consensus on scope. That scope is articulated clearly, and then word gets out to the community, particularly the Historical Society, all the other parties concerned, that that scope of repair will be discussed and final approval provided at the agreed upon date, at which time the contractor will be told to go do work. But prior to that, contractor shouldn't do work until we're all on the same page as what work will be done. That's my feeling.
So bring it back to the city council.
Would that, that's what I was going to say. Would that require coming back to the city council under your...
Right, but I don't want to be so presumptuous as to say that we are in the best position to make the determination. For example, the Historic Resources Board might be more qualified. I don't know. I'm happy to do it, but and maybe we could even invite them. I don't know if
have a joint meeting.
Jointly notice that or not. If they're even in the audience just listening, maybe we just jointly notice it and then we can have everybody chime in.
If the majority is here, then they can't speak to it.
If you don't notice
If
it.
they don't, but they can sit, but they can't speak.
Right.
Yeah, but I think we might want them to share their opinions. And I think it's an important enough building, and it's an important enough issue that it warrants a joint meeting, jointly noticed.
I concur.
I concur
Well,
with
let me give the council some assurances. I am well aware of the importance of that building to the history and culture of our community, so it would be every effort to preserve that balcony if at all possible. I am mindful, however, of the notice of abatement and your order that we make it safe. So it's not a matter of opinion as to what makes it safe. We've got to analyze that. I'm mindful of the importance of preserving the balcony and we'll strive to do that. And we'll bring it back to the council, but I don't think it's a matter of gathering opinions as to how to make it safe.
Well, we do need some input from the community at large, see what they want done with that building. And we don't want to, I mean, I don't like to see the balcony come off, because it's part of the structure. So
I understand.
We need.
Many have expressed that view to me.
Yeah.
And my suspicion is that that's likely to be the outcome. My point simply is that it's not an opinion survey as to what to do to make it safe. The building official and I have a duty to do that which will work.
Okay.
Based on your order. If you want to.
Right.
There are a number of different avenues to achieve safe, as used in your sentence. Make it safe. You can make it safe lots of different ways.
Yes.
So I think those different alternatives need to be discussed, agreed upon, and I think the community should participate in that.
Okay. So that was the purpose of the conversation with the HRB. Are you asking that we come back to the council directly, go back to the HRB, joint meeting? How would you like to proceed?
Joint meeting.
Joint meeting, I think.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, we're going to have a joint meeting. I think that, we need to, as a village here, as a group, we need to put all our minds together so we can have those kind of working relationships so we can focus on what our mission is in this town and come to the fruition of those plans.
So the public is fully aware of where we're at and where we're going, as opposed to not you, but a city manager going off on one's own and thinking that that's the best way that it should have been done. Not you.
No,
not our previous city manager, but perhaps
I understand the direction. This may or may not arise again, but it would have been helpful at the last meeting when you adopted the resolution declaring the nuisance to make that point more clear rather than direct it to the city manager.
That was vague, though. I don't think anyone understood that.
We're learning.
We
don't do this very often.
This has never happened before. It's all new to us. So it's like we're, just all
this particular project.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have somebody there with you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Step up.
Okay. Once again, Mariana Thomas. I live in a historic house, and I've spent a lot of time working on it. I urge you to get busy on Casa Rosa. I mean, this is dragged out. I brought it up before. It's dragged out. I brought it up with Jim left. It's dragged out. Okay? Fix it. I mean, get it to a point where it's going to stay the way it is, because now it's a shell. We are a city of history. Pretty soon, if we don't get it done, we're not going to have much history to show. I mean, we need to get together. If you need to get together with this historic board, please do it before there's another rainstorm or wind. Okay? I mean,
too late.
It's going to rain tonight, so.
What I mean is, I really urge you to put the clips up there, whatever needs to hold it together until it sells and someone's really committed to restoring it. Because that is your view of San Juan, that one picture, and that house is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, line 2, Fault Line Restaurant. Do we have any idea when they're ultimately going to reopen, and any idea when the... Hi, Todd.
Hi. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Jordan, that's a good question, and I have the same question for them. And let me see if I can, that's one of my list of things to do is to follow up with them. The good news is the lot merge has already been recorded, and I believe, I'll confirm with the building official, that that's sufficient for the building code as well as the engineering code. So the lot merge has all been recorded, and it's all been done, so it's basically one lot now. So far as I'm concerned, they can go ahead and submit for building permit plans, revised accordingly anytime. So,
awesome.
Anyway.
Thank you.
But I can follow up to see where they are at. I haven't heard from them in a while. So.
Thank you. Number 4, Harvey's Lockup. They have a whole list of items, time frame for acquiring an extinguisher, Knox boxes, who's painting the curb, and do we have an idea when that's going to be completed, and a time frame for the installation for the ceiling tiles?
That's all indicated. I put in a good deal of information here, and that was all required by the fire marshal's review. But the main thing is on that point was the fire alarm sprinklers, or excuse me, the fire alarm and systems and all that.
And that's all complete?
That's all complete.
Okay.
That was the main key thing.
Absolutely. And to me, these are minor details. I mean, buying a couple of fire extinguishers. Did we or the fire marshal give them a time frame for these items to be complete?
I think that's between the property owner and the fire marshal. But after last speaking with the contractor and so forth, it sounds
2 weeks.
Yeah, it sounds like it's moving along pretty quickly.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Number 7, building department activity. Code enforcement is making regular rounds to check for work being done without permits and violations of the municipal code. Have we seen any?
So far, after last discussion, I have not been made aware of any from our code enforcement officer. However, this report that you have in front of you, it's indicated to me that we're actually going to be separating it between building activity and planning activity.
Got it.
So that way it's not
Understood.
submerged. So.
Copy that. Okay, page 3 of 3, infrastructure, traffic circles. Second to the last item on that page. Street classifications for First Street has been determined. A traffic study has been commissioned. Do we know when it will be complete, and when do we anticipate receiving it?
The Traffic Commission, the city engineer has commissioned a traffic study to be done to Meritage, and that was done based on the conference call that I had with them back on February 25th. And as of right now, I think it's still in the works. So it's really with Meritage's court right now to move forward with that study. I don't have any dates right now at this time, but that's something I can follow up with the city engineer on.
I might add that the little trip wires are still there, basically on First Street. As they're coming in before the stop sign. If you're coming in from Anzar High, first trip wires, I think actually before Prescott or just after Prescott. I can't remember which. And then the second one is before the stop sign, but they're still in the road, so that tells me it's still...
The study is still in progress?
Yes.
So, Mayor, members of the council, if I may, so the larger question is, what's the status of the roundabout to be constructed by Meritage? A question that the Planning Commission certainly is pursuing. And I told the Planning Commission something for which I had to apologize, and I'm now prepared to say it out loud. I had told the Planning Commission that, based on what I've been led to believe, that the right-of-way dedication from the other side of the street, the Loaiza property, had occurred. It turns out it had not yet occurred. So the right-of-way has not been assembled for the roundabout. Meritage is required as a condition of approval to build the roundabout. It has been designed. It's of a certain size. Meritage is of the view that it's insufficient. It ought to be larger. It is Meritage that's doing the traffic study with speed tubes in order to try to convince us that it ought to be bigger. So I apologize that I misled everyone to think that the right-of-way had been acquired. It still has not. I'm meeting this week both with Meritage and the owners to see whether we can bring that in for a landing. But more important, if Meritage wants a bigger traffic circle, it's got to come from their side of the street. We'd be indifferent to a larger traffic roundabout if that's what they want, but they're only required to build the one that was designed and approved by the Planning Commission.
Can they move it over? Or is it just set in that space?
The right-of-way that the property owners across the street, the Loezas, are prepared to dedicate with their own parcel map is exactly as was designed and consistent with the approvals for Meritage. So their position, quite reasonably, is they gave it the office. They have identified and are prepared to dedicate the right-of-way that we told them they needed to dedicate.
Okay.
And last thing that wasn't on the agenda, again, sorry, Veruti Park restroom. When?
The contractor so there are two aspects of the Veruti Park restroom. One is to pour the pad and the other is to build the building. And the contractor who is building the pad has been working on well 6. And as soon as that's completed, we can move them over to Veruti. It's still not clear to me how we're going to build the building itself, whether with city forces or by a bid from the contractor. In any event, we need plans and a building permit, and we don't have those in hand.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Report from City Council appointees to regional organizations and committees. Do we have that?
That's us.
That's us?
That's us. We do that.
Okay. Well, that's the resolution number 2019XX, whatever. It says, whereas the council has made appointments and where it's appropriate to have a comprehensive roster of such appointments, and whereas by this resolution the council formally confirmed the appointments. Now therefore be resolved, the City Council of the City of San Juan Bautista hereby confirms the following appointments to city committees and commissions and regional committees. Planning Commission, Scott Frios, David Medeiros, Yolanda Delgado, Shirley Brewer, Lise McChain. What?
That was that part of this D.
That's D?
The D. Oh, wait, this is this item is just what, our reports on the committees we attend?
Yes.
Right.
So if you went to a meeting and report what happened.
So Youth Commission is Hugaj Sal, Javier Guaracha, Shailene Dornan, Simran Kaur, Jade Bixler, and Armand Sohi. The ad hoc committees, Cannabis, DeBreeze, and Freeman, Sheriff Contact, DeBreeze, and Edge, Parking within the city, Edge, and Jordan. Strategic Plan Committee, Mandisa Snowdy, Donna Holmes, Todd Kennedy, Jennifer Colby, John Freeman, Estrella Esparza Johnson, Shauna Friels, Ana Garcia, Maria Elena Madrigal, Bev Miamber. For AMBAG, we have John Freeman, Leslie Jordan, the COG, Cesar Flores, Mary Edge, WRA. What is WRA? John, you're on it.
You would have to ask me. I have to go back and look.
All right.
Now.
Anyway, you're on there, John.
That's not the water.
That's the way, I think that's the solid waste.
The water?
You're on the water. That's the solid waste organization with the county.
Okay. San Diego Homeless Planning Group, Mary Edge. San Diego COC Leadership Council, Mary Edge. Monterey Bay Power Authority, Operations Board, John Freeman. Area Agency on Aging, Mary Edge.
Whoa, time out.
Yes.
Okay, that actually needs to be corrected. I'm on the policy board. The operations board is comprised of only city managers.
Okay.
I am not a city manager.
Oh, okay. So we erase operation board on there.
And insert the word policy.
Policy board.
Yes.
Okay. Can we make that change?
So, Mr. Mayor, you have previously adopted that resolution, and I think with that minor revision, we can have the record reflect the correction that Councilmember Freeman just indicated.
Okay, cool. All right, let's see, where are we? Area Agency on Aging, Mary Edge. Intergovernmental Committee, John Freeman, Leslie Jordan. Integrated Waste Management, Local Task Force, John Freeman. This was passed and adopted today. So we
now
have to
we
move
go-
on this resolution.
We're going to reports on all of these. If anybody has attended a meeting.
I have not attended a meeting. They haven't had another meeting.
I have not attended a meeting.
I have attended a COG meeting, and I was made the chair. We got a meeting Thursday, 3 o'clock, at the supervisory chambers.
I have not attended a meeting.
But we have one coming up Thursday.
We have one coming up on Thursday.
Unfortunately, I have attended 2 meetings, so take some time. The AMBAG meeting, it was a little bit usually more excited because something called regional housing, forget what, RENA allocations.
Needs allocation.
Needs allocation. Thank you. I appreciate that. Needs allocation came out. Apparently, a lot of cities are going to be fighting with the state on this. They're giving us they're giving to the cities very high numbers, which this is the amount that we need to grow by, okay? And so it has to do with that housing element that we're doing right now. It's very important, and I'll just promise I'll stay on top of it. On Monterey Bay Community Power, on March 30th, they're having an energy fair at the Watsonville City Hall. Everyone's invited from 9 to 12. They're looking for projects. They're looking for ideas. They're looking for all kinds of things. Just come and say what you want to see happen. The other thing about Monterey Bay Community Power is while recently, 2 months ago, we kind of annexed or grew into our group the cities of Morro Bay and San Luis Obispo. It was recently all the stuff with this, because it involves electricity, rates, it has to go through the PUC, so the PUC approved it. Now we're trying to suck in the county of San Luis Obispo and 4 other cities, Grover Beach, Pismo Beach, Paso Robles, and I forget the other one because I don't live down there. And so apparently they have to vote, the Board of Supervisors have to vote, and those individual city councils have to vote, but they feel it's pretty likely because PG&E is going to be exiting the power generation business, and that's what Monterey Bay Power does, is buy the generated power from third parties. And like I said, PG&E will be exiting that business sometime in the next 3 years. The bankruptcy you've all heard about is going to take 3 years. So that's my report.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
Do we as individuals sign up with that company, or? How does that work?
You're in.
Oh, we're already in?
You're in.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that we're getting double billed. Maybe me, not personally. Somebody came and asked me about it and said both groups.
This might take longer than we want. The short answer is you're not. The short answer is you're actually paying 3% less on the power generation. The long answer is there's something called an exit fee. It's being argued in San Jose. It's being argued in San Francisco. What happens is PG&E 5-6 years ago signed very expensive long-term power contracts at the behest of the state of California for solar power and other sources of power that do not come from CO2 sources. Because of that, they're stuck with long-term contracts with these third-party power generators. And so if their demand for power, i.e. us, goes away, and they still have to pay it, the PUC decided that we would pay an extra fee to PG&E to cover their, some people say, bad decisions in signing high-priced contracts for that reason. So Monterey Bay Power, that exit fee, which is called a PCIA fee, is added to your bill, and Monterey Bay Power deducts the exact same amount out of it. So it's like it doesn't exist, okay? And then you get 3% cheaper rates in form of a rebate that comes once a year. So your power bill is slightly less, okay? That's the long answer. It can even get longer because this PCIA fee is very complex.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, we have this resolution here. Do we need to take action on this? Yes?
No, we don't have a resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I think you actually...
We did that already.
I think you were reading...
We already did that?
Action.
Okay.
That was approved.
Okay, well, whatever. We're now
We're on F.
Strategic Plan Committee report. 4F.
Go ahead, Todd. I'm tired from talking about exit fees, so I'm going to let you...
All right, no problem. Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff, good evening. Todd Kennedy, city staff. I also serve as the secretary of the SPC. Myself and Councilmember Freeman both serve on it together, so we might add in a few things. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. We had a small group, but we still had a quorum last meeting back on March 7th. Just a few things to report. March 30th and 31st, we have the Indigenous Peoples Day, or Spring Equinox. And that's going to be taking place right down over here next to the state park with painting and ceremonies and all that. There's been an effort to get the local tribes involved as well. The other thing is, and you can definitely decide if you want to agendize this, is we're going to really strive to have regular attendance by at least one of the members of the Youth Commission at our monthly meetings to keep each other informed and to make sure that, and also if we're going to do joint projects together and all. So we'd like to continue that as of right now, and if it becomes more regular, that we have regular attendance, and if it works out, then maybe we can do something a little bit more official. That was something that myself and staff were talking about. So anyway, that's what we plan on proceeding on. So that's all I have tonight. So we answer any questions. Yes.
Question. Emergency response plan. How are we doing? I'm going to ask you every meeting. Sorry.
It's okay. Let me just go and follow up. I did have a meeting a couple months ago now with Kevin O'Neill, Emergency Operations Manager, San Benito County. I'd like to invite him to do a guest presentation, whether it be to Planning Commission or even City Council. But that's one of the ongoing things that we'd like to see where we are with our emergency plan right now and what we need to do to fix it. And with that resolution that was passed a few months ago by the council, sir, I got to look at the contents. I don't have the information memorized at this point to see where we need to go from here. So.
It's my understanding that we're revising it or updating it.
As of right now, no official action has been taken to update it. It's only been talked about.
Okay, we have one.
To the best of my knowledge, yes, we do.
It might or might not.
I might add, I think it's from 2003 or 5. I forget which day. It doesn't really matter.
It needs updating.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's part of, okay. Thank you.
Any more questions for Todd? Thank you, Todd.
Mayor, I apologize if I interrupt. I should have added this in my city manager report, but Todd's report about the Strategic Planning Committee reminded me that the Planning Commission and the Historic Resources Board wanted us to notify you that those two boards are considering a recommendation to you to separate the two boards. Right now, as I said earlier, the Planning Commission serves as the HRB. The two bodies are talking about suggesting to you that the ordinance be changed so that there be two separate bodies with two separate memberships. We raised questions about the duties of the board, the qualifications of the members, and they wanted me to simply advise you that that's what they're working on.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Now we go to action items. 5A, approved performance bonus for Michelle LaForge per agreement. Her agreement, I didn't see the agreement, but from what I gather is that there was 4 elements that you needed to meet in order to get this bonus. 2 of them were completed, and 2 more were on the on the table to look at.
On the path of completion?
Yes, they're not finished. So we had a meeting, a closed session meeting, and we discussed it with Michelle, and she agreed to she has done half of it, which is 10,000. So she agreed to just go ahead, and if we offer that, she'd be okay with that. So we need a discussion on this. Any discussions?
Just a quick note, she has completed more than 50%.
Yes.
And we agreed, based on her letter of resignation, to accept 10,000.
Any discussion? Public comment? Any public comment?
Yes, excuse me. Again, Jacqueline Morris, 46 Mission Street. So as a public member, can you elaborate on what the specific benchmarks were that entitled Ms. LaForge to these bonuses?
I don't have a contract on this.
I have the contract. I can read it.
I think the public deserves to know exactly what were the benchmarks. And
Staff report indicates number 1 and number 3 on this small reading them.
So this is a contractual term, so it isn't actually a bonus. It's a contractual term that she was supposed to meet these goals by the, and the evaluation was supposed to be at the end of the fiscal year. So the goals, there were 4 of them, and she would get $5,000 for each of the goal. The first one was 2 of the 3 currently existing State Water Resources Control Board compliance orders are lifted. That was the first one. Second one, a Director of Public Works and a Director of Community Development are hired and pass their 60-day probationary period. The third one is the fiscal year was completed within the budget approved by the City Council. The fourth is the city's annual capital improvement project list has been 80% completed in each project category.
can you go back to item number 2, something about passing a probation period of 60 days? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I'll restate it in plainer language. So a Director of Public Works and a Community Development Director were supposed to be hired and hired for a period of more than 60 days. So they passed their probation period.
Okay. So that was her supervision of other staff, and so she fulfilled those vacancies?
I do not believe so.
Okay. So as far as the comment towards whether or not she completed more than 50% of an additional contractual goal, I think, whether it's 45% or 65%, she doesn't hit the 100 mark, so, she doesn't get the $5,000. And also, I as a citizen want to know if Ms. LaForge ever herself had a probationary period evaluation, because as far as I understand and observe is that she started off as an assistant to Mr. Tweez here, actually was hired in the Public Works Department, then advanced to an assistant to Mr. Tweez, who was then our interim manager, and then she applied for the city manager spot, and I understood that there would be a conditional probationary period that she would have some feedback, and the public is privy to that. And during the initial months as a city manager, there was some bad decisions that resulted and could result in legal issues for the citizens and for the city. And one of them that really still gets my craw is appointing a volunteer traffic code enforcer. And I really think that there's a lot of stuff that has to be cleaned up to move forward, and that's one of them. And I think that would have resulted maybe in, honest evaluation. She did not go before this body to get permission or direction on that action. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, yes. A couple of comments about the contract. This is not a contract with me, but it's not an unusual contract for the employment of a city manager. Unless Ms. Mullin knows, I don't think it specifically calls out a requirement for a performance review after 60 days. It does state, in addition to the 4 goals that were established, the City Council shall meet with the employee immediately prior to the end of the fiscal year, and in good faith, the parties shall evaluate and determine whether any bonus payment is due. And that's what occurred, as is appropriate under the law, in closed session. And now you're being asked to memorialize your evaluation by authorizing the payment of the $10,000 in accordance with the terms of the contract.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the performance bonus.
I will make a motion to approve the performance bonus for Michelle LaForge per the agreement.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Any more discussion? All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. B, approve appointment of J. Edward Tweez as interim city manager and authorize mayor to sign agreement. That's the next one, next item.
I have a real problem with this one.
You have a real problem with it. Comments?
It's like being on the Lakers and say you have a problem with LeBron James.
I think we're very fortunate to have Ed, help out like this. I mean, otherwise we'd be So anyway, we're open to discussion. Public comment.
I'd like to make a comment.
All right.
Whoa.
Darlene Boyd, and I'd like to welcome Ed back to town. I have appreciated your professionalism and the way you show us how the city manager should actually perform. Thank you.
Hi, I just want to say, please, City Council, approve his interim appointment. Thank you, Mr. Tweez, for coming back.
You got it, Jackie. Todd, did you have something to say?
No, he was just getting up.
Oh, okay. All right, if there are no more comments, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the appointment of J. Edward Tweez as interim city manager and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
I'll move that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Then moved it. John, you seconded it?
No, I seconded it.
Oh, you seconded it? Okay, Mary seconded it. Any more discussion? All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
Officially. Okay, now we go to discussion items. City manager recruitment update.
No, you skipped C.
I'm sorry. See? Oh, gosh. Approve deferred improvement agreements for Midnight Express and authorize the city manager executed on behalf of the city.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, about it.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have a conflict of interest. I'll recuse myself and step outside.
Okay, thank you.
What's the conflict?
He has conflicts, he has to recuse himself.
What is it?
What is your conflict?
Yeah, you should announce what it is.
He's to represent the applicant.
Oh, okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, about a year ago, the Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit for the construction and operation of a produce transfer facility on Old San Juan Hollister Road known as Midnight Express. A condition of approval is that the applicant build street improvements along its entire frontage. During the past year, the applicant and the city manager and the applicant and the city engineer have been reviewing that requirement and discussing the costs of that, the alternatives, and some of the technical challenges. This recommendation tonight is that the council approve a deferment of some of those improvements, not elimination of the improvements, not a revision of the condition, but the timing of the improvements. It's described in some detail in the staff report, but essentially it is the following. The first phase of street improvements would be along a short frontage of their property plus the frontage of the city's well site. That's identified in a sketch in your packet. The second phase of improvements would be along the remaining would be along the frontage that would be subject to any next step of their private development. So if they expand, it's a very large site. They're only building on a portion of the site. If they build more on the site, then more of the street improvements would be required. And then finally, the full improvements, as required by the Planning Commission, would be required when the full site was developed or after a period of time that's identified in the staff report. You do not have the actual deferred improvement agreement in front of you, We're asking that you approve these business terms, authorize the city manager to enter into such an agreement. The actual agreement will be reviewed and approved as to form by the city attorney. So it is not a relief from the conditions. It's a question of how we're going to phase them in. And some of the technical issues are, it turns out that there is a culvert traversing the road that would be very expensive to fix. There's a lot of underground utility work before you just put 2 inches of asphalt on top. And there are also problems with sewer and water lines. It's a force main, and so it's not easy to dig up the street every time they want to make a change. So the suggestion here is that when we were able to budget for all of those underground improvements, they would do their fair share.
One open the street once
Yes.
kind of a thing?
Yeah.
So when
It is, you often see around other communities, in Santa Clara County particularly, I don't know about Hollister, where you get a brand-new street and then suddenly the utilities come in and you have utility cuts. It's not only unsightly, it reduces the life of the road. So it's better to get the underground work done first before you put the road on top of it.
So,
Is there any timeline? Do we have
Yeah, the timeline is established in the agreement.
Okay.
In the proposed agreement.
Okay, yeah.
So
I was going to ask the same question.
I was going to, you just talked about digging up the streets on a regular basis for utility lines, water lines, sewer lines, storm drain lines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there is I'd like to agendize in the future what's called a dig once policy, and this has nothing to do with them, and it won't impose any costs on them, but it would be for the entire city. So it has to do with burying utilities, particularly telecommunications utilities underground, and the dig once means it only happens once.
That's what couldn't remember the word.
Okay, so discussion. No discussion? Okay, then. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the proposed deferred improvement agreement for Midnight Express and authorize the city manager to execute it on behalf of the city. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. I'll move to do that.
Do we hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Right. We can bring Dan back.
Dan?
Tell him we can come back. You're clear now. Discussion items. City manager recruitment update.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just to quickly update you, we have placed ads. So one of my responsibilities as your interim city manager is to help manage the recruitment selection process. And we have placed ads in some of the usual places, and I've already started receiving interest and applications. We've indicated that the first review of the applications will be at the end of this month, and anticipate a short list being developed, thorough background and checks conducted, and city council interviews in May for a possible start date in July 1st. So we're on track. I'll have some specific proposals for you in closed session in accordance with the special agenda item.
All right. I'm going to pull that block party. I haven't had much response from it, so I'm just going to pull it, delete it. Okay, we are having a closed session for the purpose of identifying. I'm sorry. Yes.
Mayor, I think you need to adjourn this regular meeting and then call the special meeting to order.
Okay.
Do we?
Well, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the regular meeting. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Now we're going to get together for a special city council meeting. We were going to start at